Hello, everyone. This is Bridget Chapman with the Souls of Many podcast, the SOM podcast. Today, I want to talk briefly about the latest U.S. Supreme Court rulings and how devastating they are to the country. And I'm going to cite some statistics so that you have facts in your hand that you can take to the bank, so to speak, and really react positively and in a way that'll be insightful to others. So here we go. I was a little bit taken aback when I heard that the Supreme Court had struck down decades long precedent and supreme law of the land as it relates to affirmative action in our country and our U.S. College institutions. And I was taken aback for these very reasons. And I want you to know also that I am an African American. I prefer to be called Black because that's just how I was raised. But at any rate, African American is fine. We're all come from the descent of Africa and we are Americans. So I get that. And that is fine with me as well. So I digress from that. But being a Black woman and being admitted into college was very important to me and to my family and my community at large. As such, I was not admitted under affirmative action. However, I am in agreement with affirmative action, and this is why. This country has had a long history with bias, racism, and just about any institution, especially our educational institutions in this country. And if you deny that, you're denying truth and fact, and you really do need to do a bit of research because it is there for the taking. So with that said, I'm going to go and cite statistics as to what's going on in this country, and I'm going to circle back to affirmative action in our education systems and college admissions, known as the Fair Admissions Act. And so I guess this came about, or I believe it came about because some Asians were suing Harvard University and saying that Harvard was holding Asians to a higher standard than others. And then Abigail Fisher, who was an applicant to the University of Texas at Austin, was denied admission with a 3.59 GPA, and all of her family, as I understood, went to the University of Texas, I believe, at Austin. So it was kind of like going there. It was a tradition, a family tradition. And she thought that she had better grades than most were admitted in that class. And she said that her spot was taken by an affirmative action candidate. And I'd also like to let you know that out of that class, 841 were admitted. 5 were Black or Latino, and 42 were white in that pool that she's discussing. So it's a very, very small number. Relatively speaking, to the 841 in admissions, and she thought she had done everything right. She said she had extracurricular, she had the SAT score to get in, she had the GPA to get in, but she was denied based on her race in affirmative action. What she is seeking in court, punitive damages, was the $100 admission application fee. And that is what she'll get out of this. But what she's really getting out of this is a broader appeal because she's connected with conservative activist Edward Blum. And Edward Blum has long been advocating against affirmative action in educational institutions for whatever reason. He has his reasons. He's a citizen of this country, and he's ignited his activism on conservative lines and conservative stories, saying that everyone should be admitted on their own merits. But we know that this does not happen in this country all the time. and that there are systemic injustices, biases, and there is racism. And if you don't look that in the face and in the eye and have a conversation with those in your community and outside of your community, you are denying yourself a real opportunity of growth and learning. Again, I digress. So knowing that decades-long legislation for affirmative action was stricken down this week, and Chief Justice Roberts wrote the opinion, and he said it is because he wants the country, basically, I'm paraphrasing, to get past seeing color and admit people basically on their merits and so forth. But we shouldn't be looking at color as a fact or an instance of admitting folks into college universities in the United States. I will tell you for a fact that some of these institutions are so incredibly racist, it's not even funny. Historical Black colleges and universities, known as HBCUs, came about because Black people could not get admitted to universities in this country. So we had to create universities to get educated, and they were Black universities: Spelman, Howard, Tuskegee, Fisk, I said Howard, I'm sorry, Hampton, Virginia State, Norfolk State. I mean, the list goes on and on and on about the historical Black colleges and universities in this country and the history behind it. And I implore all of you out there to take a look at why they were implemented and instituted, why they were never funded by the federal government, or they got very little from the federal government versus other educational institutions. It's just a whole culmination of wrong, but I digress from that. Going back to education and this decision. The conservative justices, which rule the Supreme Court now, feel that it should not be related to color. And I push back on that and say, then you need to understand racism in this country. And you need to understand how it's systemic in our institutions. And you need to understand that just in your little cul-de-sac, where you learned, where you practiced the law, where you became one of the supreme implementers now and decision makers per the law of our land, what you're not understanding is this: people that are different than you. Now, you might push back and say, what about Clarence Thomas? Clarence Thomas grew up in whiteness. Clarence Thomas grew up conservative. Clarence Thomas grew up believing that you could get where you wanted to get on your own merit if you were Black. So he doesn't even understand. And this is hard for me to grapple with, a person like that. When you look in the mirror and you see yourself, you couldn't see anything other than Blackness because that's what you are. However, he doesn't see that because he grew up in whiteness. So he only sees that side, just as the other conservative justices only see their side because they grew up in whiteness, in their culture, in their religion. So what I take issue with is putting forth the new and supreme law of the land that's supposed to last forever and ever. How in the world do you do that with a lifetime appointment and you saw very little in your world? Meaning how the world works, globalization, people, cultures. You go home to your whiteness, you live in your whiteness, and you live in your conservatism. And that is your world. So now you're ruling according to that. And guess what? The United States, by and large, is not conservative. So our Supreme Court no longer represents the United States of America and its populace. It doesn't, which is very shocking and very sad to me. I'll digress from that and I'll circle back to term limits. I think you know where I'm headed with that, but I will address that in a few minutes. Let's go through some statistics, starting with Asians, Blacks, Latino or Hispanic, Native Americans, and whites. And you'll understand where I'm going with at least the Fair Admissions Act and affirmative action. Asians are comprised of 6.3% of this population in the United States. Blacks are 13.6, Latino 19.1, Native American is about 1%, 1.3, and whites are about 57, 58% of the population in this country. We have approximately 333 some odd people in our country, and it's growing. So if you slice and dice the population, you will absolutely understand how many people are there. So Asians are 6.3% of 333 million people. Blacks are 13.6% of that, Latino 19.1, Native American again 1.3, and whites 57 to 58%. So understanding that, and the first Asians that were part of the migration to the United States and the problem that they have with college admissions and knowing that or saying that they're held to higher standards. They came to this country in immigration status, 1850 through 1917. That was the big wave of Asians. And if you look at Asians, you've got Eastern Asians, and then you've got Southern Asians. Southern Asians are Indians from India. And the Eastern Asians are from what used to be considered the Orient, but it is no longer called that. So that would be Korea, that would be Japan, that would be China, etc. So 1850 to 1917, the great wave of Asian immigration. It's pretty safe to say that they're pretty new to the country, seeing as Native Americans were this country. They were here before anybody was here. But now they only make up 1% of the population because they were pushed back. And thank you very much, Andrew Jackson, for the Trail of Tears. I say that facetiously, killing off so many Native Americans, disenfranchising them. And then we never right the wrong with Native Americans. And, you know, their population just died off, basically. And they're a very small population of what stands today at 1.3%. We know that Blacks, African Americans, were brought to this country in 1619 via slavery. We were owned by people that kidnapped us, stole us, and put us on boats and brought us to this country unwillingly to become slaves, working for free, toiling for free, being beat, being killed, your families disenfranchised and sold off in 1619. So given that history, and after the Civil War, where the Confederates lost because slavery was wrong. And whenever you lose a war, you lose the war, you lose everything. You're fighting basically for your existence, and the existence of the old way of the South was gone. Again, when you fight a war, you lose. You lose land, you lose geography, you lose everything because you've lost the battle. You've lost the battle, you lost the war. The Confederacy lost. We were unionized. After which, William Sherman put forth a field order that every freed slave family would get 40 acres and a mule out of 400,000 acres of Confederate land that was taken back by the Union in the war. Again, when you're in war, you're fighting for geography, you're fighting for land, you're fighting for principles. So the principle of slavery was no longer the law of the land. And the land where enslaved folks were was taken back because it wasn't right to have done all of that. And so as such, the order was put in for 400,000 acres that was seized in the war after the slaves were freed, to give the slaves 40 acres and a mule so that they could construct their lives and live accordingly. Now the playing field could be leveled. Well, after the war, the laws kept moving in mudslide fashion. The goalposts constantly moved and sank in quicksand, so you could no longer hunt or even approach because you couldn't see the goalposts anymore. Now, racial diversity is a problem now. It is a problem. It always was a problem. And for those who denied it, it's ridiculous for you to even deny it. Well, we've come so far. Blacks can move here. Blacks can do this. You know, blacks can do this. They have the opportunity and get whatever they want. Look at Oprah. Look at Michael Jordan. Look at, you know, it's amazing. Look at Rihanna. Look at this. Look at that. In accordance with the population, maybe 10 millionaires, billionaires that you look at in comparison to 333 million people here, it pales in comparison to the income and inequality gap in this country and at institutions, college institutions, even high school. I mean, it's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous. The highest median income is held by Asians in this country, followed by whites, then Hispanics, then Blacks, then Native Americans. That shows you that someone of Hispanic or Latino heritage, race, can come to this country and do better than African Americans or Blacks who have been here since 1619. So you should shake your head at that. And recently, the brown people who are Hispanic and Latinos are being pushed back through the media, through fear, through hate, through this, through that. I recall the president of our country saying they come here, they're rapists, they're this, they're that, all negative things. Well, what do you expect? You're stoking fear, you're inciting fear in people about a general pool of people. And now the pushback starts. Oh, we got to get these people out of here. We got to, you know, deny them. Oh, and now they're being pushed back as well. It's amazing what goes on in this country. But I do want to make mention that that ruling pushed out and pushed back decades of progress that college institutions such as Harvard and many others would look and weigh applicants and say, what is the best use of our institution's time in instilling intellect into our student pool so that our country could be made better, or this world could be made better with diversity in thought, in intellect, in just, you know, everything. They worked very hard to gather a pool of candidates to succeed and excel in a way that made institutions better, that made our country better, that makes our globe better. And this conservative Supreme Court struck that down. That is appalling to me. The other thing that the Supreme Court struck down with the new conservative panel of judges, not panel of judges, but they sit on our Supreme Court for a lifetime, was abortion and the right to choose. They pushed back and said, this decades long law of the land for a woman to choose, or woman to have rights to choose what she wanted to do with her body, has to go back to the states. Now the states can decide what that woman can do to or with her body and when. That blew me away, because what happened to our democracy and the freedom to choose your health care? You know, if I want to get stitches or not, if I want to have a surgery, a blood transfusion, if I want to save my life or not, I have that choice. Why did you take away that choice, that democratic choice that we have as people in this country under free will? And if you go back and you say, well, I'm an evangelical, or I'm a conservative Catholic, or I'm a conservative whatever, as far as religion is concerned, then you must understand what the soul is, because the soul is the mind, your will, and your emotions. And what God won't do is make decisions for you. That's your will. That's your will. They took away what God gives to people, which is the right to make decisions for themselves. And they're not God. They were wrong. They got that one very, very wrong. The other decision, whether you agree or not, student loan debt is mounting like crazy. Our government charges or lets other institutions that buy the debt or organize the debt or take over the debt of student loans to charge exorbitant interest rates on college loans. In my opinion, there should be a fee for a college loan, but not interest. That is wrong. That is wrong, because what you're asking is for students to go to college to learn to make this country better and the world better. And then you're charging them interest on doing that. As a country, that is ridiculous. If they pay the loan back, why are you charging them all this interest? What I'm getting to is President Biden's student loan debt plan, which would have forgiven, I think, up to $20,000. And most of that is a big interest on the student loan debt in and of itself. And they struck that down. Everybody should be able to pay their student loans back. Some people can't afford, their parents can't afford to send them to college. They can't find work when they get out of college because of systemic biases, or because you're not part of the club. If you're not the majority in this country, you have a really hard time. You have to work harder. You have to be smarter. You got to go get more education. You got to prove what a white man that has a high school education, for a Black woman, you almost have to have a master's or a PhD to be seen as equal to another white man in the majority. It's asinine. I had a friend, a white gentleman friend, asked me one time, why are you getting an MBA? Why is that necessary? Why are you this? Why are you that? I said, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? You don't even understand. I can't get credentialed and get, or not credentialed, I can't get consulting opportunity without this. You can, I can't. You're resourced. You got a vast net. I don't. And I don't belong to the clubs that you belong in. I can't get into the golf courses that you just can get in on a visit and start networking and meeting people. I don't have those opportunities. So I have to seek higher education to even get in the game. That is why. It's like, oh, I didn't think of it like that. Well, you wouldn't, because you're a white man and the rules are different for you in this country. It is asinine. Our ignorance is just overwhelming. But I appreciated him at least asking and wanting to know. Our justices don't even ask. Clarence Thomas on affirmative action, and I'm paraphrasing, said, I just don't get it. Well, you wouldn't get it if you were surrounded with white people that gave you access to places, people, and things. You wouldn't get the average person that grew up in a community that had no means, no access, no legacy. You wouldn't get it. These justices are blowing my mind. Amy Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Alito. Oh my God. The ignorance is just profound, profound for such people that are book smart. Their ignorance is just profound when it comes to understanding culture and the dynamics in this country, ethnicities, and biases that are happening. It is profound. We don't need any more people like that on our Supreme Court. We need people that understand the tapestry of our country. I have talked a lot today, but I wanted you to know that the latest Supreme Court rulings just really prompted me to get active in regards to putting this out there. We need term limits in all branches of our government, starting with the Supreme Court. If the President of the United States of America has a term limit, the Supreme Court absolutely shouldn't sit there for an entire lifetime with their biases and their politicization of our land here in the United States. Congress, absolutely 100%, term limits. Appellate court judges shouldn't sit there for a lifetime either. And I don't think people understand. When you get an appeal, if you say somebody did me wrong, you lose in court and you appeal it, and you've got someone that is biased and they sit there for a year, you're going to lose. You don't get a fair shake. They should not be there for an entire lifetime of service to this country. They shouldn't. That is wrong. We need term limits in all branches of government. So just to let you know, if you don't know already, the latest Supreme Court rulings, which rolled back abortion and a woman's right to choose what to do with her body, decades legislation, and supreme law of the land, they threw that out the window, struck it down. Affirmative action in college admissions, struck it down. And President Biden's student loan debt plan struck that down. Just wanted to let you know what our Supreme Court looks like to date. I hope that you write into your congressmen, your senators, and you could write the president also, and the Supreme Court, and let them know what's going on. But more important, the Congress is who enacts bills and laws, and then it goes to the Senate, and they approve it. The president has veto power, and he has a vast net. But the way that our government works is there are many, many, many checks and balances. And so that's another thing. I implore everyone to advocate for Congress knowing the Constitution, because they don't know it. They just get in and on their opinions and get on their soapbox. And it's amazing what comes out of it. A bunch of ignorance. And I am just completely over it. Well, that's my factoid for today. I hope that you have learned something, gained something in some way, in some small way, if not a very large way. This is Bridget with the Souls of Many. Have a great day, everybody.